Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Neighborhood Associates Corporation's Public Kinship webinar series. Our focus this month is our communities. The host of today's Public Kinship discussion is Dr. Bobby Austin, who is the president of Neighborhood Associates Corporation in Washington, D.C. He is joined by Yasmin Tomkinson, who is the executive director of the Cape Fear Literacy Council in Wilmington, North Carolina, and by Dr. Karina Korostelina of George Mason University's Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Among the many things that we will be excited to talk about today is Dr. Korostelina's forthcoming book, which is available for you to pre-order on Amazon right now, Neighborhood Resilience and Urban Conflict, which is based in part on a research project carried out between Dr. Korostelina and neighborhood associates working on neighborhood level resilience practices in the three Washington, D.C. communities with which Neighborhood Associates works very closely. What is public kinship? Public kinship is leadership for self and for community. The acknowledgement that we are family in our community, nations, and world, and that we act accordingly. It is the willingness of everyday people to publicly assume responsibility in acting out the phrase, love thy neighbor as thyself. It requires our leaders to support participation in the nation's public arena and promote community ethics. Some of the questions that the panel will consider today in their conversation are, what are your own and your organization's conceptions of leadership? How do individuals learn to lead themselves toward self-understanding and good action? How do communities learn to lead themselves toward collective trust, healing, action, and change? And we hope that our guests will have some stories to tell us about how individuals learn to read and interpret the world around them, and what can that lead to in turn. I will now hand it over to Dr. Bobby Austin.
Thank you, Alex. I want to welcome our panelists, and I also want to welcome those of you who were able to tune in today for this podcast. I am very, very interested in what we're going to discuss today. And I hope it will be enlightening for all of us on this journey that we've been on now about 2 years. Every time I talk with someone or have a discussion, I want to change the definition of public kinship. It gets broader and broader and broader. I can't do that. I'm going to have to stick where I am for a little while and go with that. So I'm going to ask our Yasmin and Dr. Korostelina, if they would just give us a brief statement or, a little something about what you're doing now and how it might relate to this issue of public kinship, human ecology. And we'll start with Yasmin, if you would like to start, and then we'll go to Dr. Korostelina, and then I will begin some discussion on these.
Thank you. My name is Yasmin Tomkinson, and I am now the executive director of the Cape Fear is a community-based organization in Wilmington, North Carolina. And what we do is we train volunteers to serve as one-on-one or very small class teachers for adults who are trying to improve their education. And those are students, each year we serve, in a typical year, we serve about 500 adult learners between our adult literacy and our ESL programs. And we really tailor the instruction to what each individual needs. So people may have very specific goals, like trying to get a GED or earn US citizenship. They may want to feel better about reading in church or reading their mail or speaking with their children's teachers or in stores. Each person that comes to us has different practical goals for why they want to improve their education. And that's what we help them to do. And I think that if this kind of work is a beautiful fit for public kinship. I've been thinking quite a bit about this since learning about public kinship. And I think the thing that I will probably continue to focus on is the concept of having a voice. And that, I think some people are natural leaders, some people have to cultivate their leadership skills. But until you feel worthy enough to speak your voice, I think that it is harder to feel like part of the community itself. And so that's definitely something that we see with many of our learners when they first come to us. And that's the main thing we see transform the process.
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Korostelina?
Yes, Bobby, and you can just call me Karina. It will be more like it.
Alrighty.
Yes. And thank you again for organizing that. I always happy to work with neighborhood associates. We have a long-standing relationships and support. So I'm representing here the Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and it means that my work is teaching, but also working in communities. In comparison with many other academic institutions, my school is really involved also in a lot of practice in communities in the United States, across the globe. And what is my work specifically? It's really addressing this turn in peace building from big institutions deciding on laws and constitutions building and other processes toward local, and how local can actually inform the big institution building, inform development, because the shift to local give agency and also see communities as a agent which can produce their own knowledge, which produce their agency, which produce their own ways how to deal with conflicts, and also have their own conceptual frameworks of understanding conflict dynamics, understanding inequality, injustice. So it's very important that we bridge together in situation of peace building, and we're speaking about urban peace building in this case. What this my work were related to how we bridge together the views, position, conceptual ideas of communities together with policy making, with big institution development. And I think this is very important part of public kinship, what you are talking about, because the whole idea of kinship itself came from study of ethnic groups, and it was a key for understanding how idea of the family, of common ancestry, of deep interrelation, of feeling of loyalty to the group is the key for bridging people together. And then they really care about each other and they feel the strong interconnection. So I really loved how you put it together, how you move this idea of strong kinship from ethnic studies into study of neighborhood, calling it public, not only neighborhood, but like social groups. And the whole concept of public kinship really highlights importance of understanding how community itself function. And that's why I'm really happy to be here on this seminar.
Thank you so much, both of you, Yasmin, and I can't get used to saying it, but I'm going to say it, Karina.
Yes,
but
thank you.
I know when I was doing my graduate work, I think one of the things about when you finally finish, some people are very bored with this, when you finally finish doing these doctorates, you are so indoctrinated in the ceremony and the formality of it. When I got my doctorate, my major professor, who was quite a piece of work, named Dr. Protz, said to me, "Now you can call me Howard." Well, I never, ever got around to calling him Howard. I was too afraid of him, number one, and number two, I just couldn't do it. So he finally one day he called me about something. "Why don't you call me Howard?" I said, "I'm sorry. Why don't you call me Dr. Austin?" And he laughed because I think he got it, because he never called me Dr. Austin. But, he wanted me not to think that I had to be formal with him. But I think that's a part of this training we get. And too old probably to change, but I'm going to work on it with you. Karina, today. I am very grateful that you're here because you both touched upon the things that we are trying to do, and they are they're difficult, even though in many ways it sounds simple, but it is not. I think in America we have never really tried to affect a kinship relationship between groups and individuals in the country. And that is to say that we espouse individualism, individual learning, individual everything, as if that is the holy grail, and somehow God came down and said, each individual must act as an individual only. You are not to do anything. Well, that's not true. Family and connections of kin are key to, if you are religious, to the creation, and if you're not, it certainly is key to the creation of the universe, in the sense that the universe, any scientist will tell you, is absolutely intricately interrelated. That is how it works. It works through interrelationship and not through isolation. So I think, you and I are going to have to get on the trail to helping people come back to a realization that, yes, individualism has its place, but we have really got to look at a kinship, a kin-related atmosphere in our country if we are going to make it work and have peace and peace building in the society. I don't know whether there is, I think it's simple. I don't know whether there's any other way to do it. I think it's going to be very difficult. It's simple to say, I should say. But I wonder, either one of you, please pick this up in your own work. For instance, if a person comes in and they're feeling, well, you know, I can't lead. I don't know how to lead, and I need to learn how to read, but I'm afraid. But what we're saying is self-leadership means only leading yourself. Just lead yourself. This idea that you have to lead groups of people, it's kind of far-fetched generally, but if you learn how to lead yourself, and you can lead yourself to good action, and that's where public kinship comes in, then you have created a pretty good atmosphere in and around your community and yourself.
If you don't mind, Karina, I will go first, and because I've been thinking a lot about some of our individual students and how they demonstrate this. And I wanted to start with the mission of our small nonprofit is, and we worked really hard on this, and I'm really proud of our mission statement. It is to provide personalized education so that adults can transform their lives and contribute to a stronger community.
Mm-hmm.
Some time to really think about. It's, you know, education is not just for the sake of education, it is for the application of it. And thinking about this in terms of public kinship and what Bobby was just speaking about, I want to sort of contrast two of our adult learners who are actually very good friends. And they are, so Miss Barbara has a pretty profound learning disability, and she has been with us for years, and she has made really good progress. But she is also just sort of a natural leader, just who she is. She's not a fearful person. She has raised 4 sons, and they've all gone to college, and they've all done very well. And even though she herself couldn't learn the way she wanted to, she always worked. She was a welder. She was the kind of person that if you could show her how to do something, she could do it. And she knew that about herself. So maybe that gave her some confidence, even though her reading and writing skills were quite low, to be honest with you. But she, you know, and when I say that she's a natural leader, it's not that, I mean, maybe corralling 4 sons is a lot of leadership in itself, but it's, you know, she is comfortable in herself. Like you just know that about Miss Barbara. Whereas Miss Carolyn, when she first came to us, she was an extremely reserved, shy person. She does have a soft voice, but in the time that she has studied with us, she went from a third grade reading level to going off the charts of above 12th grade reading level. She was in third grade when her school was integrated, and that is when her education stopped because the stress of the environment really, it halted her learning. She put her energy into sort of survival rather than the rest of it. And but she too worked her whole life and she raised a family, but she really, I feel like she has found her voice as she has gotten more educated, and she's a poet. It's this amazing thing that when she was provided with the right kind of tools, what is possible for her to accomplish. And she also now takes not only does she have a stronger voice for herself and is more engaged in so many different things. She volunteers in her own community, and she makes sure that the kids in her neighborhood have books to read, and she takes care of the people around her all the time. But also she and Miss Barbara together are part of a class where these are learning readers who perform readers theater productions in front of hundreds of people. So that is, and more, traditional style of leadership, not just the individual inner leadership, but they're able now to externalize it. And they are both just they're amazing. They're lovely human beings who have also made incredible progress, and who have both, in my opinion, come into a stronger sense of themselves in this educational process.
And they've made a kinship bond, it sounds to me.
Absolutely, they have not just with each other, but also with the other members of their class and with their volunteer teachers. They have such a strong and supportive relationship, and I think have really honest conversations, which I think is critical to all of this.
Karina?
Yeah, thank you. It's wonderful, very interesting examples. I just want to address, I think, the tension which you, Bobby, brought about having public, social, and individual. And I think the best way to resolve this tension is to really unite theories of moral development and how we understand social identity development. Because when we look into people who are members of their groups and their communities, and they might be involved in the groups, but at the same time, they might be have a negative attitude toward other groups. Usually what happening in polarized societies like United States, or they can have biases toward other groups, other minorities or majority and minority relations. They can be involved in patterns of discrimination, this exclusion and inclusion. This is what connected with people being in the groups. So being in a group itself doesn't mean it's a good thing, because yes, you can be good to people inside the group, but you always have an out group which you probably dislike or discriminate or compete with. But if we speak about going up in moral development and going up into this personal development, what you are talking about, personal learning, what is important is people start realizing that they are members of multiple groups and start reflecting how these multiple groups impact their own behavior. What is there from their own and what is there from the group? Like grandfather Nietzsche was telling, right? So then you ask a person why you behave in particular way, person will tell, oh, it's come from my heart. But how it's coming to your heart in the first way, where it is from, right? And if people start, and the freedom for Nietzsche is exactly understanding where our values come from, where our aspiration, where our norms come from, and who put it there and for what purpose. And this is what real empowerment and freedom in terms of individuals. And individual is not become individualistic, but individual become aware of how he behaves or she behaves and think based on membership in multiple groups. And this bring person, increase this individual position in society, but in the same time making this individual much more sociable, much more connected to society, less biased, less involved in this patterns of exclusion and inclusion.
Mhm. I think, thank both of you for those different but completely aligned ideas. And maybe that's going to be one of the most helpful things about public kinship, that it moves on levels from the very nascent community to the very, where the community is, where a community of sorts is, to the huge universal community of peace building that you're talking about, Karina, with your work at the Carter Center, because nothing happens if the ground under which you're working is falling apart, that it's shifting and you can't have connections. People don't have actual connections with each other if they can't bond with each other. And I think what Yasmin was telling us is that here in this group of people who have come to correct for themselves something that they want corrected, they have found not only for their own self-leadership role, but they've found kindred spirits, as we used to say, people that they can connect with. And I'm very worried about how we find kindred spirits in our communities. For instance, if you don't mind, maybe Karina, talking a bit about resilience and social capital and collective efficiency in the neighborhoods that we are a part of, that is our organization, how they are able to create resilience in their communities, because some people would look at those communities and say, well, they have nothing, or they don't have money. A lot of them, they are not this or they're not that, and yet you were able to find so many interesting and positive things, not the least of which was their ability to create coherent and resilient communities. And then I want to ask the same kind of question of Yasmin, that for me, when I read, and I am I love to read. So, I mean, I hate to even say how many books and things I buy and read, but I do. My wife, the only thing she says she's going to have to put me out of the house is I have more books now than we have house to put them in, is that every time I read something, it affects me, deeply, and I get lost. I'm trying to finish up this book. Well, every time I get led to another book, I change, and I want to stop that. As the Buddha said, I have a real monkey mind when it comes to reading and picking up things. So, how have you been able to work with individuals so that they can maintain, those community bonds that they make, the individual kinship bonds? Are they resilient? Can you see that when they, how long have they been around? And then after Karina tells us a little bit more about the study and really what I think is going to be amazing when Americans read these stories, is this becomes the kind of book that John McKnight, he didn't write a book, but he certainly he sparked an entire movement with his work, and his work really through the major foundations that helped to support what he was doing. The way he looked at communities differently than others who looked at the same communities and only found deficits he didn't find deficits, he found assets. And so that's kind of, I want to see how we can tie, when I say we, I mean neighborhood associates, tie our work into asset building, but not necessarily, we don't have to call it asset building, but there are many, many, many types of assets. And I think, Karina, you found some of those. And so I just wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, sure, Bobby. So first of all, I probably will bring a little bit some unusual critique of the word empowerment, because empowerment itself imagine immediately or assume that some people are disempowered and some people are somehow, there is some hierarchy of people of knowledge and so on. And what my work is coming from completely different perspective. I still speak about empowerment, but from the way how it's a two-way street, because you're not going into, especially I do work around the world. Right now I'm working in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Serbia, in Lebanon, in addition to working here in US. And while there are multiple differences, there is still the dynamics of communities who live within conflict. And for me, I always come with respect and understanding that these communities have more knowledge and more understanding about their everyday lives than I can have, even with all my experience of peace building around the world. So this idea that you come, respect and listen to community and help community to also reflect on what they're doing. This is where knowledge comes from. It's not teaching them, but helping them to organize the knowledge which they already have in particular way. And that's why the work was really extremely rewarding in these neighborhoods. First of all, as thanks to neighborhood associates, these communities are really overcome so many challenges. In book, I show comparison between these communities and other neighboring communities, how the multiple levels, including crime, including education, all indicators are really showing that communities are able to take control over themselves, over their lives. And I think this control over their life is the key. If Alex, if you don't mind, if you can share for a second this slide with 4 loops, because I want to show, I think it will be more if I show this visible, because what 4 loops, the one which have 4 circles, 5 circles, yeah, this one. So this is what I want to
Karina, we like looking at Jimmy Carter and
yeah.
Scott.
Good. I'm really proud to have a name of Jimmy Rosalynn Carter for our school. So it's wonderful. So I'm happy to see it again. But Alex, can you show this? Yeah. So I just wanted to show with this particular loop because it's given more visual idea. Resilience is not a linear process. Is not even one-sided process. We speak about recovery, we're speaking about trauma, but for me, it's really taking control over your life. And in this particular model, which I developed during the study, really showing that communities are able to develop practices of resilience. And these practices of resilience, at their own way, they responding to existing problems, but they changing the problems. That's why it's a loop. For example, if we're speaking about structure of conflict, we understand urban conflict, we understand structural violence, we understand gangs, sometimes persistent poverty in many places, unemployment, and low level of education, as Yasmin will be probably talking about. But we also see how communities are able to actually change it. How, for example, they work with police very closely, inviting police to they share their center, community center with police, giving police opportunity to have their meetings there. And they have young policemen program where young children become engaged with police. So there is a good engagement with it, which helps them security. They sharing information about unemployment. There are people who work in a community, invite young kids to do with them together maintenance of community, giving them skills of which can be useful for employment. They work strong, they develop summer school for children, parents leading summer schools for children, trips for children to give them opportunity to learn. So they do change structure of conflict in a way that it's become less effective, especially on young generation. Then if we speak about external resources, we also see that there are a lot of critiques how services are delivered, but at the same time, they learning and sharing feedback to the services. Through this feedback, they're trying to change, for example, how medical services are delivered. The urban planning for them, it's a very serious issue, especially gentrification, and they're trying to deal with this issue, addressing it in town halls, bringing people into the community. And as Bobby told, community capacity is extremely important thing. Speaking about efficacy of community, efficacy is ability of people think and know and be motivated to change community. We're speaking about sense of community where people strongly interrelated, which is public kinship, very strong public kinship. They see themselves as a family. And they do a lot of things to actually increase those community capacities. What I found, a lot of practices of resilience specifically create this public kinship. They have a lot of events they run together, like cook-offs. They run trips for communities. They have celebrate communities. They have a birthday card sending to people in community. They have a community bank, which is, yes, they help each other during the hardship, but the most important, they celebrate achievements of people and help to celebrate it. So it's really very strong. And finally, we also see dynamics of identity and power in community. And this is what Bobby was telling about, understanding that communities are not homogeneous. This is a mistake of many practitioners or politicians coming, oh, there's a neighborhood. It's not homogeneous. There are so many dynamics, micro dynamics of identity and power. Some groups have more legitimacy than others. Some groups become more excluded and included. And as Bobby told, exactly, we found that younger men become excluded from practices of resilience, from decision making, while majority of decisions are made by older women. Also, legitimacy of elderly people, women are stronger within the community. We usually, a lot of publications show about religious role of religion and legitimacy. I didn't find it very strongly there. I really more found that those who have a strong legitimacy, it's those who work for community, those who are respected for their devotion for community, who volunteer time. This is more important than religiosity or any other topics. So as you see here from this particular figure, the process of resilience, it's never ending cycle of improving responses to conflict, to improving external resources, building more and more community capacities. And what we also found in this research that together with social capital within communities, these communities are very eager to build cross-cutting ties with other communities, develop this cross-cutting social capital, where they go to other communities and share with them what they're doing. And I think this is really empowering them. And just one more very, very good practice of community, which I believe very important. For example, communities which we study, they collect money, even they have a low income unemployment, they still collect money and give for people who are unemployed. They collect some items and send to children in Africa to support schooling in Africa. And through these processes of philanthropy, they really increase their own self-esteem, which is extremely important in situation of conflict. But they also creates a strong bond in communities, a positive bond within the community.
I just want to, this is one of the, to all of you out there, when I read, I can't say it, Karina, I'm trying. But when I first read the book, I think I called her and I was like, oh my gosh, this is, I could have written this had I been smart enough, taken enough time and, done this actual spade work that you've done, because I was taken by these simple acts of goodness that she unearths in our communities, where a newspaper person, someone might come in and look at it and say, oh, these poor people, they're just wallowing out here and they're dying and this. A person can come in with a totally different point of view to learn about these people, they call them these people, and what these people are doing, and find out they're actually practicing philanthropy. Do you know what that means as public kinship goes? That you're willing to give up what little you may have. In fact, if somebody were to say it in terms of our materialistic society, you're willing to give up some of that for somebody else. You're willing to say, I would like to send my 50 cents to help a kid in wherever, Africa, whatever it is. I want to give some of my money to the church. I want to, yet they still themselves may need certain materialistic things. They have created a world of public kinship, which is what you're defining, where I feel so related and so a part of my community, I am going to give. I think if nothing else, if we can over our lifetime get this point of view out with your book and our work to people, they can probably see the world differently, because I think you cannot look at your work and not see the world differently. We have allowed certain groups to talk about sponging on society, immigrants who sponge on society, immigrants who cause problems of this. We allow that narrative to be written by politicians, lunatics, and other people who create them. And we all sort of go along with it because we don't think we have the ammunition to say differently. Well, now we have the ammunition. This is a study that it's taken a little while to get out because Karina had to go through a lot of different people for them to, and I think a little of it, I'm going to say it now that you published, I think a little bit was prejudice. They just did not want to believe that what they consider poor communities could do these things. They just could not conceive of the things that you're talking about, that they just couldn't conceive of them doing it. I mean, what do you think about that? Am I just sort of making
Bobby,
things
you're completely right. This is what I really believe, that the whole idea that to paint some people victims of structural violence, it disempower them. They make them so one-sided people who do not have agency. And I think showcasing agency, just giving them voice, an opportunity to discuss and reflect, because I believe any research which we done, and I'm so glad that how many students were also involved in this research, and they grow with this research, but community also grow with research, because anytime we ask people questions, they reflecting, they answering, and they formulating for themselves a new narrative about themselves. And they open eyes and reflection on something which they probably didn't think before. And bringing research back to community for public meetings really help communities to self-reflect, and it means take more control of their own life. You're completely right. Instead of painting people as the victims, we really need to see them as equal partners in the process of building peace and urban environment.
Thank you. Yasmin?
Yeah, I would love to jump in right there. That was a perfect segue because, I look forward to reading Karina's book. It's at a
We're trying to make everybody look forward to reading.
what I think a lot of small nonprofits like ours do at a very grassroots level, right? I think I'm going to keep coming back to this granular level,
Please,
but
please.
but I think that is also where, like you see it in practice and action. And one of the things that I wanted to say, I just had so many thoughts and when both of you were speaking, but one thing is, we train our volunteers who are going to come in to tutor the adult learners. And we focus on, let's think about what strengths your learner has. Let's start as, maybe somebody is reading at a second grade level or can barely speak English, but that person is also a parent and a worker and has navigated this society without those advantages, right? Like they have to have resilience to be able to do that. And I think that by starting with that mindset, that growth mindset as the place from which you begin and from which you launch, and by keeping it relevant to the learner's life, it helps to, Bobby, you had asked, like, how do people not sort of get distracted with all these new ideas? And the difference for us, I think, is that so much of what we do is, first of all, survival focused. Then and then past survival, it's functional. They're not, we definitely have some students who read for pleasure, who want to escape in a book or learn a new idea, but so much of it is very practical and very much, I need to understand how to fill out this form to get this, to process something for my child's school, right? Like it is that level of education. But what is very interesting in the process is that, and this happened to me personally, when I came to the Literacy Council in 2002, I came as a volunteer and I thought, oh, well, I have this, this ability, and let me give back to my new community, and let me share what I know. And instead it is such a partnership, and I learn more from my students than they could possibly learn from me. And I've heard so many volunteer teachers say the same thing. It's not just the reward of helping somebody. It is actually, in a selfish way, learning new things about life, understanding somebody from a different background, a different culture, a different experience, and finding that we're both humans that share certain things and we have differences, and those are things we can talk about in a meaningful way with a sort of objective platform. And we learn and we grow from it, and then that becomes the like a stronger kinship bond, because we are coming from different tribes or communities or ecologies. And when we get to know somebody or a small group of people in a very intentional way and explore those differences, but always with a goal of improving ourselves and sharing and understanding better, then breaks down so many of the obstacles. And in that process, we all learn a bit about resilience. I've worked with, I personally worked with a couple of adult learners more in depth than others. And one was a young man who had graduated from high school. He came from a family that was very supportive, but he just had extremely low self-esteem, and he was really frustrated. And he literally kept his head down. He rarely made eye contact. He was 23 years old. He knew what he wanted to do. And he would say, well, this is the job I want, but I'm stupid and I'm never going to get there. And it took time for us to build trust with each other. It really did. But I think when he felt understood and he realized that, I wasn't going to laugh at how he wrote things, because for me, it was sort of solving a puzzle. And then we could communicate in a whole new way. And then this young man who, was younger than me, he taught me all kinds of things, and he taught me about life, and he taught me about his perspective and about living in the South and what it meant. And I wouldn't be married right now. He encouraged me to give my then date a second chance, because like I was like, oh, this guy, he just talked too much, and Chris said on to be my husband. So there's and he does talk too much, but I do love him anyway. But there's so many things that we can learn from one another. And the other gentleman I worked with, and Chris is a white person. Mr. Ronald is a Black gentleman who was 20 or 30 years older than me, and a very beginning reader. And he wanted to read the Bible, and it was some of the best philosophical conversations I've ever had in my life. With you can call him a beginning reader, call him, he worked at very labor intensive jobs, but he has an incredibly kind heart. I learned so much from him. And he made Christianity really meaningful. There are all kinds of connections that we can have with people. And in that process also become stronger individually and together. And so very granular level compared to what the kind of the scope of what Karina's talking about. But I think that if these small victories happen, then it does ripple out into each of the people involved and into that community as well.
Yasmin, I just want to, if I can jump very quickly, I really, really appreciate that you stress the self-esteem, because in social identity, self-esteem is the key for acting, for people being able to be active agents of change. And it's so often overlooked, especially on the level of community self-esteem. And I really was amazed how many things people really doing to help. Like there is a cleaning practice. They love to clean their community, and they always so proud how their community much cleaner than neighboring communities. They do this as well philanthropy practices. And what I really loved, and I think it's very important, they name buildings after names of community organizers, of active people in community, or people who devote their life. It's a local heroes, and then naming this buildings after these people really gives, this is the communities I'm talking about, they name people, name building after these people, helping bring the value of community and value of service to community on a very high level. Just wanted to really stress the importance of self-esteem, which very often overlooked.
Absolutely. And that's one of our beautiful communities there, Carver Terrace, that was in this particular setting.
This is the Patty Hartsfeld Center at Carver Terrace Apartments in Ward 5 of Washington, D.C.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for bringing it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to wind our part up. And if there are those, I can see one wonderful statement that someone has sent in, and I would like Alex to cue him up and read that statement. I think it's a beautiful statement in regards to what we are saying. But why don't we do that now? Is he still on? His name is from Charles, I think it is. Are you with me, Alex? Can you see who that is?
I am going to allow Charles Betterton to speak.
Oh, it's Charles Betterton, of course. Hi. Please. Charles, I love what you just wrote. I mean, it's fantastic. You want to join this conversation and tell us what this is and what you just put out for us?
Well, it's not my quote, but first I want to say congratulations. I'm ready to buy the book, Karina. Where's the
Thank
buy
you.
button?
Thank you.
And like Dr. Austin, who kept telling me to call him Bobby, and I
Bobby.
had to struggle with that. I'm gonna start calling him Dr. Bobby, just
Oh, that's okay. All right.
so the quote that I put in there, I heard in 1989 at the Community Development Society, the 12th annual conference, and it was an important route to empowerment is building local capacity. When a community and its people are empowered, they have the capacity to articulate their needs, to identify actions to solve those needs, and to mobilize and organize resources in pursuit of community-defined goals. When the people of a community come together to visualize a common future and then work together to achieve it, there develops a recognition that everyone, regardless of education, job, race, background, or whatever, has something to contribute to that process. Indeed, the greater the diversity of the participants, the richer the vision and the more effective its accomplishments. The only refinement that I could make to that after 30 years is, and discover the field of public kinship,
Exactly. Thank
So
you,
thank
Charles. That's
Yeah.
I love that. It's like a capstone to what we have been talking about here. Charles, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do? Because I've met Charles. You will love his background, ladies, and what he is doing nationwide. We are creating this conversation, and it's many people are talking and interested and joining. And I think the book is going to be a real key piece to how we get that done. I don't want to leave out Repairing the Breach, which is my little book, but it's 20 years old now, so it would have to be redone. I'm too old to think about that, I'm going to tell you. But I will say that, Charles, talk a little bit about what you're doing and how it relates to this.
Well, I generally say that I try to stop doing and get out of the way and move more into allowing or being. But I have to say that I've just adjusted my life purpose statement to include repurposing, repairing the breach.
I love it.
When you started talking about how John Cobb needed to be publishing his vision, calling for ecological civilization. But anyway, background, grew up Mississippi Delta.
Yes.
Second youngest of a career military family. First job was an unsolicited grant from the Quaker American Friends Service Committee to support public desegregation of public schools. That serving as a disaster relief specialist for what's now FEMA. 6 years with floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, which led to a few man-made disasters in Detroit, East St. Louis, Chicago, and Kankakee, Illinois, places that were suffering from decades of racial, geographic, and political divisiveness. Do we have any of that today in America? So the wall behind me represents a number of present and forthcoming programs and projects to help people discover repairing the breach, Katrina's books, Yasmin's whole suite of products and inventory. So I'm more of a curator, a gatherer of, a marketer, and a distributor of resources to help us awaken to our true spiritual identity for the A, realize more of our inherent potential for the R, and know how to fulfill our ultimate destiny, which to me I describe as steward heirship. Being faithful, grateful stewards of our lives, the talents and treasures entrusted to us, the books that we've been introduced to that we can help share with the world, and leave a legacy.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Oh, I tell you, this has been a breath of fresh air. I was kind of, you get down some days. I have terrible sinus, and in Washington right now, we're totally overcast, and what that does to me is bring all that junk down. No matter what you take, it just does not relieve it. But when you have good conversation with good people, it certainly helps to relieve that. I think that this has been a fantastic and eye-opening and marvelous conversation. I'd like to do it again, maybe even repeat it, but I know we have it recorded. And we have your, I hope we have your okay to rebroadcast it. And I'm going to go back, if I could, to, I was going to ask one question, then I'm going to go back to Alex. I'm sorry, I don't want to talk too much, but one of the things that I am also interested in, and I like how Yasmin says it, from this granular, which is at the base of things, and then this cosmic vision and view that Karina and the Carter Institute has, is this idea of peace building in communities. You see, we are attacking really the violence in our communities as if it were something alien to the communities that they are in. Well, they are not. They are, it's like human ecology. They're tangential to it. They're in it. How do we build peace? And the reason I'm asking this is I know you both can answer it because I've heard you basically say it, Yasmin, and I've read part of what Karina has said about it. But I'd like to work with the Carter Institute and you to say, why don't we have a meeting where we show that these things are not separate, that the granular community is, because you're doing this in the wider world, and if you're over in that you're working in, and the broader world is about really local. Everything, what is it? Everything local is, what's this say, is I don't know, there's a phrase that people use, but it is both local and it is universal. And if we can get the language and the models and the discussions going about how we deal with the local in peace building and community building, it will transform how you do it on the global. And so Yasmin and Karina, if you would do that for me.
Yeah, I mean, as I told, this is what we see in peace building. There's really strong shift into local knowledge and local agents. There are a lot of ideas about local peace indicators. There are research on this, but I think neighborhood is the unit which is very often overlooked in urban peace building. Mostly it's look into the groups, activists, NGOs, but people live their lives, everyday lives. They change their community, one action, one practice at a time in their communities. So learning from them, sharing their knowledge. So the idea of this book is really help people think on this level, how we can use what we already know about communities to empower other communities in terms of, again, empower to think what they're already doing, not to bring them knowledge, but help them to think what they're already doing, help them reflect on what they're already doing, and help them also to what I really see as a very strong part of it is that they want to share their knowledge, and they realize that they really doing so many interesting things and new things and very creative things. They eager to share it with other communities. They eager to go to different events in their neighborhoods and tell them and share them and invite them and learn from them. So it's really become a cycle where communities learn from each other and become more and more empowered in this process.
Yas, before I go to you, Karina, one question. Do you think that is something that would be of interest, like our communities and our people talking with communities abroad that you're working with, just to share? I once ran a foundation, and we brought some young men from Paris to Washington, D.C. We wanted to have an exchange between boys because it was a boys' foundation. And it was such a learning experience because our boys, the American boys, learned so much from the French boys. Most of them were North African. But when it was all over, they basically said, wow, we're really a lot alike, aren't we? And, because they didn't, they weren't all that interested when we first told them what we were going to do. We don't speak the language, all the things, the kids would say. But when it was all over, they wanted to do it again. And what I'm thinking is maybe we need some citizens diplomacy that goes between groups in India and groups in, because we're all in America living together, but we know nothing about each other, and no one ever seeks to tell us about each other. I had a very interesting group I started about 6 years ago. I started a lot of groups, but I don't seem to quite finish all of them. But I started because it was in my living room, and this guy was a cab driver, and he was Ethiopian, and he was telling me how they simply move incoming immigrants to the country just anywhere. So you look up on your blog, and so this new group of families in robes and speaking the language, and you know who they are, you know how they got there, and it breaks up any kind of continuity. And what happens? It becomes antagonistic without it be. It should never be antagonistic, but that's how people are. It's we and they. So they become this enemy. I don't know who they are. They're in my community. No one ever explained that. And so I'm just wondering, is there something already at Carter, or could we do something?
Yeah, Bobby, it's actually a wonderful question. Thank you. I really appreciate this question. What we really see that people only can able to understand what's good, who they are, and what's their identity and what they're doing in comparative perspective. Because you live within your life, you don't know what's actually going on unless you start comparing yourself to others and you start seeing what is different between us and them and what make us very unique or very powerful or very strong. Like, for example, when I was teaching in Japan, Japanese students told me that they realize what Japanese identity mean only when they start traveling abroad. Because when you live within your life, you don't really realize that it can be different in different places. So to realize the sense of it is very important. And peace building, field of peace building, it's actually now in a very, very interesting place because we started internationally, like we did so much work, we continue doing so much work. And only recently we realized we need peace building in the United States. Only recently we realized that this is a place where also we can apply. So there are so many knowledge already collected internationally, which could be brought here to widen perspective. And I see resistance. No, it's not interesting. We live in here, we really need to think about what's going on right here. But how you can realize what's going on right here without really looking what's going on in other places?
Exactly.
It's so narrow approach, so limited approach. So the only way really to build peace in the United States is exactly develop this bonding capital between different communities. And I see, for example, there's a wonderful project which is in Johns Hopkins University, supported by a German government. Then they actually do bring German and US communities together and see how resilience work in them. I really extremely envious for this. I would love to have something like this exactly. And I think this is where you really build knowledge and empower communities. Very, very good question.
Right. Yasmin?
Well, I think we tend to, I have been talking a lot about the cultural differences of people, just from different socioeconomic or educational backgrounds. Here in our program, we also serve, our ESL community represents 44 different countries. People speak different languages, and we're a relatively small city, in the Southeast. There's so much potential for learning and the different kinds of dynamics that can come out of being intentional about whether, if we're talking about this is how it is in American culture, this is, we do a class specifically for parents. So parents from other countries can understand how American schools work, because in many countries, you don't talk to your kid's teacher. You would never ask questions that would seem defiant, but here it would almost seem like a lack of engagement, right? And so learning process is also understanding what is your culture and how does that work and what is appropriate here. And I love this concept of peace building. I'd never considered the work that we do to be that, but I do think, extrapolated, it really is that, and that makes me feel even better about, about this kind of grassroots work, and I think the thing I am really taking away from this conversation is the opportunities at so many different levels, right? So whoever is out listening to this conversation, you might be the kind of person that wants to advocate at a policy level. You might want to research and understand, community dynamics or different kinds of groups. Or you might be the kind of person that wants to understand your community, or you might be the kind of person that wants to work very directly with an individual. But all of those elements are necessary and then ultimately contribute to the same progress, hopefully, towards kinship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My time is about up, but I want to end this way. This has been not just, I've said this already, not insightful, very insightful conversation, but a needed conversation. And it is a conversation that should be broader. I think we can find a way to make it broader because I'm glad to have everyone who's on, but I think we need more people and we need to do more public relations around it because it is probably the key to us having a country worthy of being called a country. And I don't say that lightly. I take things very seriously. And once you break the bond of relationships in a country, and I can't say we've always had the greatest bonds, but we have had some, particularly civil ones. And that's breaking down, has been broken really since the last 4 years, that some people just are not able to organize their lives and their thoughts around positive things that are a part of this country and why we're here and what we do and the good that we do for each other and for the world. And I want to thank each of you for your unbelievable contributions to this conversation. And I thank you. And I thank Alex for putting it together because he is the person, yeah, he deserves a clap. He is the person who brought this all together. So I will turn it over to him. And again, I thank you. And I hope we'll be able to talk again. Okay, Alex, it's yours.
Thanks to all of you. At this point, I would like to ask that if anyone in the audience has a question for our panel of guests.
We see your face.
Yes, let me go ahead.
I don't like those.
I will go ahead and unmute everybody. I had asked.
I see there are 2 questions already wrote by Norlin from Chicago.
I can see it too.
Yeah, maybe a person can.
Norlin, you are
Norlin,
unmuted.
yes, Norlin. Oh, he's our friend. Norlin, you had a question. Go right ahead.
Here he is.
But he's muted.
Norlin, are you there?
No, he's muted.
No, he keeps going off.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just so my questions were really to Karina because I've been working at the systems level and have been engaged with Bobby for well over a year now, trying to integrate the public kinship vision into this larger. Just to let you know, I'm a Protestant, but I am a member of the Focolare movement, which is a Catholic movement that has this deep spirituality of communion, economy of communion, and politics of communion that maps to, on a secular side, you could call it deliberative democracy, and you could call it, local living economies movement. And then there's this asset-based community development movement. I listed all those in my question, but all I wanted to say in general was my entire project is about getting leaders at Ecological Civilization and the Christian Community Development Association and the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, they're all working on the same thing. They're all working to uplift people, and there's a general agreement among people that are actually doing the work in communities that there are these principles of letting the community has the answers to its own problems. There's a social capital gap that needs to be, the capacity side of that needs to be built. But I guess I would love to hear, Karina, what you're finding from the vantage point that you have at the Carter Center of efforts that are being made to link the various approaches that tend to be divided by theological. Catholics and Protestants and secular folks are doing their thing, and every community is comprised of all three of those demographics, and we could be doing a lot more if we were doing it together. And I was curious as to whether you're seeing progress on that front.
Yes, thank you very much. First, small correction, it's Carter School. There is a Carter Center in Atlanta, and we are Carter School for
Carter School, right, sorry, apologies.
Yes, I know, it's fine, we're a new one, so that's why I'm stressing our identity. It's very important. But I completely agree with you. Coalition building is the key in this process, and also build a norm of cooperation between organizations. I also found that because of system itself, as you told, you're working with systems, of structure itself, then different organizations receive monies, grants, support for working with communities. They do compete for ways how they work in community, compete for the ways how they represent communities, which does not really help communities. And a lot of people do recognize it in communities themselves. A lot of critiques how people just come, give them something and then leave without engaging in deeper conversations. And the most important, without any coordination. So I strongly believe that for community resilience, for neighborhood resilience and urban peace building in general, cooperation, coalition building between organizations, and also giving incentives, economic incentives for them to cooperate and not to compete, is a very important part. Then maybe should be some grants or some support for inter-organizational engagement, from cross-cutting ties between different, as you told, for example, religious organizations working in community. And also, I saw that in your question about love your neighbor, I want to, again, as a scholar, I always trying to problematize every concept. And what we see sometimes that a religious approach to love your neighbor does not equate your neighbor to you. It's giving you opportunity to help and maybe see the victimhood of the other and empathize, but do not really see these people as equal to you. So I think what is important in these processes and a lot of religious support is really see others as equal, respect and trust communities which they help in. And this is not always the case. And people are feeling it. They really feeling that there is like father-children relationships, parents-children relationship with the church. And sometimes it's not what they really expect in working with these communities.
I like that. I had not thought about that. I think one of the things I'll do is look at our statement, because it certainly was not meant to reflect that, but how other people approach it. We have always been gingerly looking at, how religious can you be in this work, and I try not to infringe upon people's religious ideas or not, but then but if you look at almost all of the religions around the world, and I did look at this long before I got into this, there is always something in their scriptures, in their readings, that's to treating the stranger as your friend, treating one another as your brother. So it all equates to mankind as one, as brother, the stranger as my friend. And so maybe we can work on how we say that, but I do thank you. I love that very much. I appreciate it.
The panel today has been Dr. Bobby Austin, president of Neighborhood Associates Corporation, a 501c3 nonprofit located in the District of Columbia. To learn more about us, which I will say more about at the end, visit neighborhoodassociates.org. He has been joined by Yasmin Tomkinson, who is the executive director of the Cape Fear Literacy Council in the wonderful city of Wilmington, North Carolina. Please visit them at www.cfliteracy.org to learn more about their work and how you can support it and be involved with it. Dr. Karina Korostelina is with George Mason University and its Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, where she is the director of the program on the prevention of mass violence and the program on history, memory, and conflict. Please visit the Carter Center at carterschool.gmu.edu to learn more about their work as well. Dr. Korostelina's book, which we have been talking about today, is called Neighborhood Resilience and Urban Conflict, the Four Loops Model. It will be available, I believe, a week from Friday, and you can get it by visiting the publisher directly at routledge.com or by going to Amazon. Please join NAC in its public kinship work. Visit our website again at www.neighborhoodassociates.org and visit our public kinship page at neighborhoodassociates.org/public-kinship to learn more about our thinking about public kinship and the ways in which we are practicing and encouraging it in our communities. You can read civic stories about our residents and partners, watch these webinars, and much more. If you'd like to learn more about us, please contact us at contact@neighborhoodassociates.org. We also invite you to join the evolving public kinship think tank on our website. Just go to the website and click the button marked Think Tank. You can also find us on all your favorite streaming social media platforms. Thank you so much to all of you, to our guests, and everyone for joining us today for this discussion, Public Kinship, Our Communities, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Public Kinship webinar. Have a great day.